My mother called me that Tuesday afternoon. Her voice was different. Broken. She whispered 3 words I'll never forget. They hurt me. I was deployed in another state. Army Ranger training still fresh in my veins. 30 minutes later, I learned she'd been brutalized at a gas station by bikers. The police said there wasn't enough evidence. They said it was complicated, but they didn't know who my mother raised. They didn't know me. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal and revenge stories, and comment your city or country. I was sitting in the barracks in North Carolina when Charlotte called. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because Tuesdays were always quiet, the kind of day where nothing happens, where time moves slow, where you think about everything except what matters. I was cleaning my rifle, just going through the motions. The metal was cold under my fingers, familiar. After 3 years as an Army Ranger, a rifle felt more like home than any house ever did. The phone buzzed. Mom. I answered without thinking. Hey, Mom. What's up? That's when I heard it. That sound. The one that stops your heart. She was crying. Not loud crying. The quiet kind. The kind that means something is genuinely wrong. Marcus, baby. I need you to listen to me. Something happened. My entire body went rigid. Mom. Tell me. Right now. I'm okay. I'm fine. But I went to Miller's gas station today. Around 2 o'clock. You know the one near. I know the one. Keep going. There were 5 of them. Bikers. They were just standing around. And one of them said something. Something awful. About my body. I felt my jaw clench. I ignored him. I always ignore things like that. But they didn't like it. They didn't like that I ignored them. One of them grabbed my arm. Really hard. I tried to pull away, and her voice broke. And what, Mom? What happened? He pushed me. I fell into the shelving. The milk carton broke. It went everywhere. And they just kept laughing. They kept saying these horrible things. One of them ripped my purse out of my hands. When I tried to reach for it, they pushed me again. Into the freezer door. I hit my head. I stood up. I didn't plan to. My body just did it. Are you at a hospital? No. Are you hurt? Like really hurt? Do you need an ambulance? I'm bruised. My arm. My shoulder. I have a headache. But I'm home now. I'm safe. The store manager came out, and they left. They drove away really fast. I was already moving. Grabbing my keys. My jacket. Don't go anywhere. Don't talk to anyone. I'm coming home. I'm leaving right now. Marcus, you don't have to. I'm coming home, Mom. I'll be there in 8 hours. Lock the doors. Don't answer for anyone except me. I hung up. The drive from North Carolina to Pennsylvania is 8 hours of highway. 8 hours of darkness. 8 hours of your hands gripping the steering wheel so tight you think they might break. 8 hours of not thinking. Because if you think, you lose control. And I couldn't lose control. Not yet. My name is Marcus. I'm 28 years old. I've been an Army Ranger for 6 years. I've been deployed to places most people can't even pronounce. I've seen things that would make normal people lose their minds. I've killed people. I've watched people die. I've trained my entire body and mind to be a weapon. But in that car, driving through the darkness, I wasn't a weapon. I was a son, and my mother was hurt. When I finally got to the house, it was almost 2 a.m. The porch light was on. Charlotte was sitting in the rocking chair outside, wrapped in a blanket even though it wasn't cold. I saw the bruise on her arm first. Dark purple. Still fresh. Angry. Then I saw her face. Her left eye was swollen. Not badly, but enough. Enough that I could picture exactly what happened. Enough that I could see the fear still living in her expression. I didn't say anything. I just pulled her into my chest and held her. And she cried. Not the quiet crying from the phone. Real crying. Deep, broken crying. It's okay, I whispered. I'm here now. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. And we both knew it. Later, sitting at the kitchen table with coffee neither of us wanted, Charlotte told me the full story. Every detail. The words they said. The way they laughed. The look in their eyes. The feeling of helplessness when she couldn't fight back. She told me about going to the police station that same afternoon. About Officer Reeves taking her statement with sympathy that meant nothing. About being told that without video evidence, without specific identifications, without witnesses willing to testify, there wasn't much they could do. They said it was complicated, Charlotte whispered. That's the exact word. Complicated. Did they get names? I asked. The store manager said the leader was someone called Victor. He's apparently well known. Runs a motorcycle gang. But the police said without proof, they can't even question him. I heard that name. Victor. And something inside me shifted. Something cold. Something final. Tell me everything. Every single detail. What they looked like. What they were wearing. The bikes. Everything. As Charlotte talked, I felt the ranger waking up inside me. The part of myself I tried to leave behind when I got out. The part that knows how to find people. How to extract information. How to make very bad men understand very real consequences. She didn't know it yet. But by tomorrow, I would have names. Addresses. Patterns. Everything I needed. The police wouldn't help her. The system had already failed her. But I wouldn't fail her. I made myself a promise sitting in that kitchen at 3 a.m. A promise I intended to keep. Victor Marks had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I woke up on the couch. Charlotte had insisted I sleep, even though I knew she hadn't slept at all. I could hear her in the kitchen around 5 a.m., moving quietly, making coffee like it was just another day. Like her son wasn't home. Like her body wasn't covered in bruises. Like the world hadn't shifted on its axis. That's the thing about Charlotte that most people don't understand. She doesn't fall apart. She doesn't scream or cry or demand things. She just keeps moving. Like if she keeps moving fast enough, the bad things won't catch up to her. I found her staring out the kitchen window, a cup of coffee cooling in her hands. You should eat something, I said. She didn't turn around. I'm not hungry. Mom. I know what you're thinking, Marcus. I can see it in the way you're standing. That military stance. That look in your eyes like you're calculating something. And I need you to promise me you're not going to do anything stupid. I didn't answer. Because I couldn't promise that. Not anymore. I mean it, she said, finally turning to face me. I know what you're capable of. I've known since you were 16, and that boy from school pushed me in the grocery store parking lot. I saw that look in your eyes then too. You found him. You didn't hurt him, but you scared him so bad he transferred schools. That was different. Was it? Because it feels like the same thing. And I can't have that, Marcus. I can't have my son throwing away his future because of me. I sat down at the table. Mom, you were assaulted. Multiple people. In broad daylight. And the police did nothing. I know. You know? How can you be so calm about this? Charlotte finally sat down across from me. And that's when I saw it. The thing she'd been hiding. Not the physical bruises. Those were obvious. It was the other thing. The thing that happens to people when the world tells them their pain doesn't matter. Because I've lived long enough to know that justice isn't always about the police or the courts, she said quietly. Sometimes justice is just about surviving. About not letting what happened to you define who you are. About getting up the next day and going to work and pretending everything is normal, even when it's not. That's not justice, Mom. That's just accepting it. Maybe. Or maybe it's wisdom. I wanted to argue with her. I wanted to tell her that she deserved better. That the men who did this should face consequences. That accepting it was the same as telling them it was okay to hurt people. But I could see she was tired. Not just physically tired. Spiritually tired. The kind of tired that comes from living in a world that doesn't protect you. That afternoon, I went with her to her shift at Rosie's Diner. It was a Friday, which meant it was busy. The lunch crowd was thick with construction workers and office people and regulars who'd been coming there for years. I sat in the corner booth and watched her work. And I watched how people treated her. Most of them didn't notice anything was wrong. She moved between tables with that practiced grace she'd perfected over 15 years. Coffee, food, smiles, the rhythm of service. But I noticed how she flinched when a customer raised his voice. I noticed how she held her left arm carefully, like it was fragile. I noticed how she smiled a little too hard, trying to prove that she was fine. Mrs. Patterson came in around 1 p.m. She was a regular. 70-something, widowed, came in every Friday for the same lunch, turkey sandwich, side salad, iced tea. Charlotte had been serving her for years. I watched them talk, watched Charlotte's face go pale, watched her nod while Mrs. Patterson whispered something in her ear. After the lunch rush died down, Charlotte came and sat across from me in the booth. Mrs. Patterson told me something, she said quietly. She was at the Iron Hob bar last night. That's where those men hang out. She heard them talking. The one they call Victor was bragging. He was telling people about what happened at the gas station. He was laughing about it. He called me an old lady who got what she deserved for being disrespectful. I felt something crystallize inside me. Something final. Did she say anything else? She said there were at least 10 other people in the bar. Everyone was listening. Everyone was laughing. Charlotte reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Her grip was tight, desperate. Promise me you won't do anything, Marcus. Promise me. I know what that look means. I've seen it before. But I can't lose you. I can't have you throw your life away because of this. I looked at my mother. Really looked at her. Saw the bruises. Saw the fear. Saw the way she was trying to hold everything together even though everything was falling apart. And I lied to her. I promise, Mom. She relaxed. Believed me. Because mothers believe their sons, even when they shouldn't. That night, I drove past the Iron Hog. It was exactly what I expected. A rundown bar on the edge of town, surrounded by motorcycles. The kind of place where bad men go to feel powerful. The parking lot was half full. Music was blasting from inside. I could hear laughter, rough and crude. I didn't go in. Not yet. Instead, I sat in my truck across the street and I watched. I watched men in leather vests come and go. I photographed their faces. I noted their license plates. I committed everything to memory, the way soldiers do when they're gathering intelligence on a target. Victor Marks came out around 11 p.m. I recognized him from a photo I'd found online. Tall, muscular, the kind of guy who'd spent his life making other people afraid. He was laughing with two other men. They were talking about something. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the body language. They were comfortable, confident. They believed they were untouchable. I started the truck and followed him. Over the next 3 days, I did what I'd been trained to do. I gathered intelligence. I talked to old contacts, people I'd served with who had access to databases, to information. I pieced together Victor Marks's life like a puzzle. His history of violence, the assault charges that had been dropped, the restraining orders that had never been enforced, the network of people protecting him, corrupt cops, judges who owed him favors, lawyers who specialized in making evidence disappear. The system didn't just fail Charlotte. The system had been built to protect men like Victor. By Sunday night, I had everything I needed. Names, addresses, routines, weaknesses. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, and I made a decision that would change everything. Charlotte found me there at 2 a.m., staring at my screen. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "Just thinking." She didn't believe me, but she didn't push. She just sat down next to me and put her head on my shoulder, the way she used to when I was a kid and nightmares woke me up. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too, Mom." And in that moment, sitting in the darkness with my mother, I felt the last piece of my civilian life fall away. The last piece of the man I'd been trying to become since I left the army. The Ranger was fully awake now, and Victor Marks had no idea what was coming. I didn't realize until later that Victor had already done his homework on me. It happened Monday morning. I was at the grocery store with Charlotte, helping her with errands like nothing had changed. We were in the produce section when a man approached me. Mid-40s, weathered face, patch on his leather vest that read Iron Riders. He wasn't Victor, but he was connected. "You're Marcus," he said. Not a question. I turned slowly. Charlotte froze next to me, a head of lettuce still in her hands. "Who's asking?" "Name's Diesel. I work with Victor. He wanted me to deliver a message." Everything inside me went cold. Not with anger. With calculation. If Victor knew I was back, if he knew who I was, that meant he'd been checking. That meant he understood the situation better than I'd given him credit for. "I'm listening," I said. Victor says what happened at the gas station was a misunderstanding, that your mother didn't have to come to the police with complaints, that everything could have been handled differently if she'd just been respectful. Charlotte made a small sound next to me. A gasp. A whimper. He also knows you served 6 years with the Rangers, Diesel continued. Knows you've been deployed. Knows your training. And he wants you to know that he respects that. Military to military, you understand? But he also wants you to understand that this town has a certain balance, a certain way things work. And Victor is part of that balance. I stepped closer to him. Not threatening. Just closer. Is that all? Almost. He says if you're smart, you'll take your mother and go back to North Carolina. Or wherever you came from. Let this thing blow over. Because Victor's got friends too, Marcus. Friends in places you probably don't want to know about. And he'd hate for something to happen to a decorated soldier. Bad for everybody's PR, you know? The threat was wrapped in a bow of civility. That's what made it effective. I didn't respond. I just looked at him. And after a moment, he nodded, understood that his message had been delivered, and walked away. Charlotte's hands were shaking. We need to go home, she whispered. But I wasn't thinking about going home. I was thinking about something else. Something important. Victor knew I was here. He'd clearly had me investigated, knew about my military service, my training. And he'd send a messenger instead of confronting me directly. That told me something. It told me he was careful, calculated. Not just a thug, but someone who understood strategy. Which meant this was going to be more complicated than I'd thought. That afternoon, I sat in the basement of our house with my laptop and made some phone calls. My first call was to Brady. We'd served together in the Rangers. He was still active duty, stationed at Fort Liberty in North Carolina. We'd saved each other's lives more than once. Marcus, man, how you been? His voice was exactly like I remembered. I need information, I said, about a motorcycle gang. Iron Riders, based out of Pennsylvania. Leader named Victor Marks. There was a pause. That's not something I can just look up through military channels, brother. I know, but you know people who know people. I need to know if Victor has connections. Law enforcement, government, anything that would explain how he operates with no consequences. Another pause, longer this time. Why are you asking me this? I told him the whole story, about Charlotte, about the assault, about the police doing nothing, about Victor sending a message. Okay, Brady said quietly. Give me 48 hours. I'll make some calls. See what I can find out. My second call was to Detective Sarah Mills. She worked for the state police, not local. I'd met her years ago when she came to my high school to talk about law enforcement. She'd always stood out because she actually seemed to care about justice, not politics. I found her number through an old school directory. This is Detective Mills, she answered on the third ring. Detective Mills, my name is Marcus Henderson. I'm not sure if you remember me, but you came to our high school in Pennsylvania about 12 years ago. I remember you, she said immediately. You're Charlotte's son, the one who joined the military. Relief flooded through me. She remembered. Yes, ma'am. I'm home now, and I'm dealing with a situation. My mother was assaulted at Miller's gas station on Route 9 last Tuesday by men connected to the Iron Riders motorcycle gang. The local police filed a report but won't investigate. I was wondering if the state police might be interested. There was a long silence. The Iron Riders, she said finally. That's not a small thing you're asking about, Marcus. Those men have protection. I know, which is exactly why I'm calling you. I can't promise anything, but let me look into it. Send me the details of what happened, the names of the officers involved, everything you know about who attacked your mother. I sent her everything that night, every detail Charlotte could remember. Every scrap of information I gathered about Victor and his crew. Tuesday morning came with unexpected news. Detective Mills called me. I've been doing some digging, she said quietly. And Marcus, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this conversation. Understand? Understood. The Iron Riders have been under investigation by the FBI for the past 2 years. Not just for local crimes, assault, robbery, drugs, but for much bigger things. Federal crimes, organized crime connections. There's been a task force working on building a case, but they've been moving slowly because the bikers have connections in local law enforcement that are compromising the investigation. My pulse quickened. How compromised? Compromised enough that evidence has gone missing. Witnesses have recanted. Cases have been dismissed. There are officers on the force who are actively protecting Victor Marks. Can you help? I can try. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. If I move on this, if I start digging into your mother's case in a way that threatens the bikers' operation, things could get worse before they get better. These men don't respond well to pressure. I understand. Do you? Because I don't think you do. You have military training. I get that. But these aren't soldiers following rules of engagement. They're criminals with nothing to lose. Detective Mills, they hurt my mother. They assaulted her in broad daylight, and then sent someone to threaten me at a grocery store. They're already making this personal. Yes, they are. Which is exactly the problem. That evening, I was sitting on the porch when Charlotte came out with 2 cups of tea. You're planning something, she said. It wasn't a question. I'm not doing anything stupid. That's not an answer. I looked at my mother. Really looked at her. The bruises were starting to fade. But something else hadn't faded. The fear. The sense that the world wasn't safe. That bad things happened and nobody cared. I'm going to get them to answer for what they did, I said quietly. Not through violence. Not through revenge. Through the system. Through the law. But I need you to trust me. I do trust you. That's what scares me. I reached over and took her hand. Victor thinks he can intimidate me. He thinks he can send messages and I'll go away. He thinks because he has connections with local police, he's untouchable. But he's made a mistake. He hurt the wrong person's mother. And now he's going to find out what happens when you do that. Marcus, Mom, I promise you. This ends. And it ends with justice. Real justice. Not the broken kind. She didn't look convinced. But she nodded anyway. And in that moment, sitting on the porch with my mother, I felt the pieces starting to fall into place. Victor had underestimated me. He'd assumed that because I was military, I was simple, that I operated on rage and violence. But I'd learned something in 6 years of service that Victor probably never understood. The most dangerous thing isn't a man who acts on emotion. It's a man who thinks 3 steps ahead. Detective Mills called me on Wednesday with a lead. I've been pulling files on Victor Marks going back 15 years, she said quietly. And Marcus, there's a pattern here. A clear, deliberate pattern. He's targeted vulnerable women. Women without family protection. Women who wouldn't fight back. My jaw clenched. How many? At least 7 that we can connect to him directly. But there are probably more. The ones we know about. 3 of them never reported anything because they were scared. 2 others reported to local police, and the cases were mysteriously dismissed. 1 woman eventually moved out of state. The last one, she's still here. Her name is Violet. She was attacked 2 years ago. Is she willing to talk? That's the thing. She's been too terrified to come forward officially. But I've been working with the FBI task force, and they want to build a comprehensive case against Victor. They want multiple victims, a pattern of predatory behavior, connections to the organized crime network. If we can get Violet to testify alongside your mother, we have real leverage. Where is she? I can't tell you that yet, but I'm going to reach out to her. If she agrees to cooperate, we move forward with a formal investigation. That means state police, FBI presence, and a lot of pressure on Victor's organization. And if she doesn't agree, then we work with what we have. Your mother's testimony is solid. The store manager will corroborate. We have physical evidence, her injuries documented at the hospital. We can move forward, just slower. I thanked her and hung up. The next 12 hours were some of the longest of my life. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those other women. About how many times this had happened. About how many times the system had failed them. Thursday morning, Detective Mills called again. Violet is willing to meet with you, she said. Not officially. Not with me present yet. She wants to know who you are first. If she feels safe, then we move to the next step. We met at a coffee shop 30 miles away from our town. Neutral ground. Safe ground. Violet was younger than I expected. Late 30s. She had that look in her eyes, the one that comes from being broken and trying to put yourself back together. I recognized it because I'd seen it in Charlotte's face. She ordered tea. I ordered coffee. We didn't talk for the first few minutes. Detective Mills said you're an Army Ranger, Violet said finally. Is that true? I got out 3 years ago. And now you're home because of what happened to your mother. Yes. She nodded slowly, like she was deciding something. 2 years ago, I went to a bar with some friends. The Iron Hog. I didn't know anything about Victor or his gang. I just knew it was a place where people went on weekends. There was music and cheap drinks, and I thought it would be fun. She stopped, wrapped her hands around her teacup like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. It wasn't fun. Victor decided he liked me. When I wasn't interested, he got angry. He cornered me in the bathroom. He said I was being disrespectful. He said I needed to learn how to treat a man right. I felt something hard and cold crystallize inside my chest. I reported it to the police. I went straight to the station and reported it. The officer who took my statement was polite enough. But then nothing happened. No investigation. No arrest. A week later, someone slashed the tires on my car. A week after that, someone broke into my apartment. Nothing was stolen. They just wanted me to know they could get to me. So I stopped talking about it. I stopped trying to get justice. Why are you talking about it now? I asked. Because I'm tired of being afraid. And because Detective Mills told me about your mother. About how many of us there really are. And I thought, maybe if we all spoke up at the same time, maybe then something would actually change. By Friday afternoon, I had confirmation from Detective Mills that the FBI was ready to move. We're opening a federal task force investigation into Victor Marks and the Iron Riders, she told me. Official charges will be filed early next week. In the meantime, I need you and your mother to understand that things might escalate. Victor's going to know something's happening. He's going to be scared. And scared men do unpredictable things. Understood. I'm assigning officers to monitor your house. Discreet. You won't see them, but they'll be there. I told Charlotte about the investigation that night. Not all the details, just enough for her to understand that things were moving in the right direction. How many others? She asked quietly. Enough. Enough that the FBI thinks they can build a real case. She didn't celebrate. She just looked relieved, like she'd been holding her breath for days and could finally exhale. Saturday morning, something shifted. I woke up to my phone ringing. It was Brady. Man, I got the information you asked for, he said. And it's worse than you think. Tell me. Victor Marks has connections to 3 law enforcement agencies. Local police, county sheriff, and even a state trooper. These aren't just friendly relationships. We're talking about money changing hands. Favors being exchanged. One of the local cops is actually his cousin. How deep does it go? Deep enough that Victor's been warned about investigations before they happen. Deep enough that he's basically operating with immunity. But the FBI is involved now. That should change things. Yeah, it should. But Marcus, be careful. Victor's going to know something's wrong when the FBI starts poking around. And when cornered animals get scared, they lash out. I hung up and stared at the ceiling. Everything was moving forward exactly as planned. The investigation was solid. Multiple witnesses. Pattern of behavior. Federal involvement. Victor's protection network was about to get exposed. But Brady was right about one thing. Scared men do dangerous things. And Victor Marks was about to become very scared. The FBI moved faster than I expected. By Monday morning, federal agents were at the Iron Hog with arrest warrants. I watched it happen from a distance. 3 black SUVs pulling up, agents and windbreakers emerging with purpose. Victor was taken into custody on federal charges, organized crime, wire fraud, extortion, and assault across state lines. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. Because that same Monday, Amber showed up at our house. I'd been seeing Amber on and off for about a year before I came home. Nothing serious. We weren't exclusive. But there was something between us, something that could have become real if I'd stayed in North Carolina. She drove up to Pennsylvania without warning, pulled into our driveway, and asked to talk. We sat on the back porch. Charlotte gave us space. I shouldn't be here, Amber said. If Victor finds out I talked to you, I'm in danger. But I had to tell you something. Okay. Victor's brother is still on the loose. And he's angry. Really angry. Victor's in federal custody, and he's blaming your mother. Blaming you. His brother's name is Colin. He's even more violent than Victor. Less controlled. And he's planning something. My entire body went tense. What kind of something? I don't know specifics. But I heard him talking to some of the other bikers. He said something about teaching the old lady a lesson she won't forget and making sure that Ranger regrets ever coming back to town. When? I don't know. But Marcus, Colin isn't going to wait. He's going to act fast before the FBI figures out he's important to the organization. I stood up, paced to the edge of the porch. Why are you telling me this? Because I like you. And because what's happening to your mother is wrong. What happened to Violet and those other women is wrong. And I can't just sit back and let Colin hurt more people. After Amber left, I called Detective Mills. We're aware of Colin Marks, she said. He's on our radar. But right now, we don't have enough evidence to arrest him. We're monitoring him, but he hasn't done anything overtly illegal yet. He's planning something. We know. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. Just because we know he's planning something doesn't mean we can arrest him for it. That's not how the law works. We need actual evidence of an actual crime. So what do? We protect your mother. We have surveillance on the house. We're watching Colin's movements. And we hope he makes a mistake. That night, Charlotte came into my room around midnight. She looked scared in a way I'd never seen before. I got a call, she said, from an unknown number. They didn't say anything, just breathing. And then they hung up. My instinct was to tell her everything was going to be fine, that I would protect her, that the system would work. But I was starting to understand that the system was broken in ways I couldn't fix alone. We're going to stay at Detective Mills's safe house for a while, I said, just until this is resolved. I don't want to run, Marcus. I didn't do anything wrong. You didn't. But sometimes running isn't about guilt. It's about survival. We moved to the safe house on Tuesday. It was a nondescript 2-bedroom rental on the edge of town. Detective Mills had another officer stationed outside. It felt like prison dressed up as protection. By Wednesday, I was losing my mind. The waiting was worse than any combat deployment I'd experienced. At least in combat, you knew who your enemy was. You knew when and where the threat was coming. This was different. This was anticipation mixed with helplessness. This was knowing something bad was coming and not being able to do anything but wait. On Thursday, Amber called me. Colin's moving tonight, she said urgently. He's got at least 4 other guys with him. They're planning to hit someone. I don't know who, but they're armed. Marcus, you need to warn whoever they're targeting. I hung up and called Detective Mills immediately. We need to move on Colin now, I said. Before he does something. We can't, Marcus. We don't have evidence. I know. But we have a credible threat. We have time. If you wait for him to commit a crime, it might be too late. There was silence on the other end. Where are you? Mills asked finally. Safe house. Stay there. Lock the doors. I'm coming to you. Detective Mills arrived with 2 other officers 40 minutes later. She looked stressed in a way I'd never seen before. Colin just tried to firebomb a lawyer's office, she said. The lawyer who's been working with us on the federal case. The bomb was poorly constructed. It failed to detonate. We caught him on surveillance camera. That's enough. We have him now. Relief flooded through me. Real, genuine relief. What about your mother? Is she safe? She's safe. Colin was targeting the lawyer, not Charlotte. This was about disrupting the investigation, intimidating witnesses. But even as Mills said it, I could see the weight in her expression. Colin was arrested. Victor was in federal custody. The case was moving forward. And yet, there was still something unsettled in the air. Something that told me this wasn't over. Later that night, sitting in the safe house with Charlotte, I realized what it was. This had been the easy part. The part where the system actually worked. Where law enforcement did their jobs and criminals got arrested. But the real test was coming. The part where Victor and Colin faced trial. where witnesses testified, where the outcome wasn't guaranteed, and where everything could still fall apart. Charlotte held my hand. "You did good," she whispered. "You did really good." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that good actions led to good outcomes, that justice actually meant something. But I'd lived long enough to know that wasn't always true. The federal investigation into the Iron Riders unraveled like a sweater with a loose thread. Once Colin was arrested trying to firebomb the lawyer's office, the entire operation came under intense scrutiny. The FBI started digging deeper. What they found was worse than anyone expected. Detective Mills called me into her office on Friday morning. The safe house was becoming suffocating, and she assured me that the immediate danger had passed. "I want to show you something," she said, spreading documents across her desk. "This is what we've uncovered about Victor's organization in just the past week." What followed was a detailed breakdown of a criminal enterprise that had been operating in our small town for over a decade. Drug trafficking, money laundering, protection rackets targeting local businesses, and a systematic pattern of violence against women that went back years. "We found records," Mills continued, "hidden in a storage unit that belonged to one of Victor's associates. Photographs, videos, dates and locations of assaults, names of victims. Most of them never reported anything because Victor had already intimidated them or paid them off." I felt my stomach turn. How many? 17 confirmed victims going back to 2012. That's just the ones with physical evidence. There are probably more who never reported, who were too scared to come forward. She pulled out a file. Inside were photographs of women, different ages, different backgrounds, but all with the same hollow look in their eyes. The look of people whose pain had been dismissed. "Your mother was attack number 18, Mills said quietly, "and she almost died without anyone ever knowing the full scope of what was happening." That afternoon, I met with Violet and 3 other victims who had agreed to cooperate with the investigation. We met at a community center, neutral ground, with Detective Mills present as a mediator. Violet spoke first. Her story was brutal, not just about the assault itself, but about the years of fear and silence that followed. About how she'd changed jobs, moved apartments, lived in constant fear that Victor would come for her again. The second woman, Jocelyn, had been assaulted in 2015. She'd reported it to local police. The report disappeared. She'd heard through the grapevine that a local officer had warned Victor she was talking. She'd moved out of state 2 years later. The third woman, Harper, had been working at a convenience store when Victor decided she'd been disrespectful. He'd followed her home and waited outside her apartment building for 3 hours. She'd called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. Nothing came of it. The fourth woman, Paige, had been a waitress at a restaurant Victor frequented. He'd asked her out multiple times. When she refused, he'd told her she was making a big mistake. The next day, someone threw a brick through her bedroom window while she slept. No investigation. No follow-up. As I listened to their stories, I began to understand something that went beyond anger or justice. I understood that these weren't isolated incidents. This wasn't one bad man making terrible choices. This was a system. A deliberate, calculated system designed to control women through fear and intimidation. And the system had accomplices. Detective Mills brought me evidence of corruption that same evening. "Officer James Patterson," she said, showing me a photograph of a man I recognized from around town. "He's been taking money from Victor for 7 years. We have bank records. We have surveillance footage. We have communications between Patterson and Victor's associates. He works in the local police department?" "He did. We arrested him yesterday on federal corruption charges." She showed me more names. A county sheriff's deputy, a clerk at the courthouse who had been altering records, a judge who had dismissed 3 assault cases against Iron Riders members, including 2 cases involving women who had come forward. The system wasn't failing these women, Mills said. The system was actively protecting their assailants. That's a different kind of crime. A worse kind. The federal indictment came down on Monday morning. 47 counts against Victor Marx alone. Organized crime, racketeering, assault, wire fraud, drug trafficking, sexual exploitation. The list was extensive. Colin faced similar charges, plus attempted arson and attempted murder for the firebombing. 17 additional arrests came down simultaneously. Members of the Iron Riders organization, corrupt law enforcement officers, and others who had been complicit in the protection racket. The story dominated local news for the entire week. A small town's dark secret was suddenly exposed. The narrative shifted from a simple assault to something much larger, a criminal organization that had been preying on the community for years. But as I watched the coverage, I noticed something. The media was focused on the crime itself, the spectacular nature of the corruption, the drama of organized crime in a quiet Pennsylvania town. What they weren't really talking about were the victims, the women whose lives had been disrupted, the women who had lived in fear for years, the women who had been disbelieved and dismissed. I drove to see Violet after the indictments. She was in her apartment, sitting on her couch with a cup of coffee, looking at news coverage on her phone. "It feels different now," she said when she saw me. "Knowing that everyone knows. Knowing that I'm not crazy or exaggerating or overreacting. Knowing that I wasn't the only one." "You never were," I said. "I know that now. But for years, I felt like I was. Like I was the only one who couldn't just move on and forget about it." She paused, then looked at me directly. "Thank you. For coming home. For making noise. For not accepting the lie that nothing could be done." I wanted to tell her that it was all going to be okay now. That the worst was over. But I'd been through enough trials to know better. "The trial is going to be hard," I said. "Victor's lawyers are going to try to discredit you. They're going to try to make you doubt yourself. They're going to use every trick in the book. I know, but at least I won't be alone this time." That night, I sat with Charlotte on the porch of our house. We'd moved back from the safe house. The immediate threat had passed. 17 other women, Charlotte whispered. And I almost became number 18 without anyone ever knowing. But you didn't. And now everyone knows. Does that make it better? Does knowing that there are 17 others somehow make what happened to me less traumatic? I didn't have an answer for that. "No," I said finally. "It doesn't. It just means that your pain wasn't pointless. It means that by speaking up, you're potentially protecting future women from experiencing what you did." She nodded slowly. "That's something, I guess." But we both knew that something wasn't enough. Not really. Not when 17 women had already suffered. Federal prosecutors scheduled the trial for early December. That gave us 6 weeks to prepare. Detective Mills brought me into strategy sessions with the legal team. Not as a participant. I had no authority there, but as someone who could help understand the depth of what we were dealing with. "Victor will walk free if we can't prove our case," the lead prosecutor, Janet Richardson, said bluntly. "He has expensive lawyers. They'll argue that the evidence against him is circumstantial. They'll try to discredit the victims. They'll claim harassment and political persecution." "What about the bank records?" I asked. "The money transfers from Officer Patterson to Victor. That's not circumstantial." "It's not. But Victor's lawyers will argue that Patterson extorted money from him. That Victor was a victim too. They'll find an angle. They always do." I understood then what Violet had meant about the system being compromised. Justice wasn't about truth anymore. It was about who had better lawyers, who could afford better PR, who could create the most convincing narrative. But we had something Victor's previous victims didn't have. We had corroboration. Multiple women telling the same story about the same patterns of violence. We had documentation. We had witnesses. And we had time to prepare. Over the next month, I worked with Charlotte and the other victims to prepare their testimony. Not to coach them. Richardson was explicit about that being illegal, but to help them understand what was coming. "They're going to try to make you angry," I explained to Violet one afternoon. "They're going to ask inflammatory questions designed to make you lose your composure. Because if you lose your composure, the jury will think you're unstable. They'll think your testimony is emotional rather than factual." "That's not fair," Violet said. "No, it's not. But that's how the system works. I also prepared them for what would happen when their private details became public information. Testimony about assault would be reported in newspapers. Details about their trauma would be discussed on social media. Their names would be part of the permanent record. Some of you might want to remain anonymous, Richardson offered. We can request that with the judge. Most of them declined. They were done hiding. 2 weeks before the trial, something unexpected happened. Victor's brother Colin agreed to testify for the prosecution. In exchange for reduced sentencing on the arson and attempted murder charges, he was willing to provide information about the organization's operations. Detective Mills delivered the news personally. He's taking a deal, she told me. He'll face 5 years instead of potentially 25. In exchange, he gives us the inside story on how the operation actually worked. Names, dates, money flows. Everything. Why? I asked. Why would he flip on his own brother? Because Victor was going to let him face 25 years while Victor himself walked on a technicality, Mills said. Because Colin realized that his brother never actually cared about him. He was just another asset in the criminal enterprise. That's when I understood something fundamental about organizations built on fear and control. They're inherently unstable. They work only as long as everyone believes they'll be protected. But when that protection evaporates, the whole thing collapses. The trial started on December 3rd. I watched from the courtroom as the prosecution laid out their case methodically. Bank records showing payments to corrupt officers. Surveillance footage of Victor at the gas station, at the Iron Hog, at locations connected to other assaults. Text messages between Victor and his associates discussing business opportunities that were clearly euphemisms for violence. Then came the testimony. Charlotte took the stand first. Her voice was steady as she described what happened at Miller's gas station. She described the physical sensations, the fear, the humiliation. She answered every question from the defense attorney without breaking down, without losing her composure. When she stepped down, I saw something shift in Victor's expression. Recognition, maybe. Understanding that she was no longer afraid of him. Violet testified next. Then Harper. Then Jocelyn. Then Paige. Each woman told her story. Each woman described patterns of predatory behavior. Each woman described a system that had failed her and communities that had blamed her. The defense tried to discredit them, suggested they had ulterior motives, claimed they were exaggerating. But with each new witness, the pattern became clearer. This wasn't isolated incidents. This was systematic abuse. On day 7, Colin took the stand. His testimony was devastating. He described the organization's structure, how Victor used fear and violence to control territory, how certain police officers provided protection in exchange for money and information, how the organization deliberately targeted vulnerable women because they were less likely to report or be believed. My brother believed he was untouchable, Colin said, his voice hollow. He believed the system was rigged to protect him. And for a long time, he was right. The jury deliberated for 14 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous on all counts. Victor Marks was convicted of organized crime, racketeering, assault, and sexual exploitation. He faced a minimum of 30 years in prison. As the verdict was read, Charlotte squeezed my hand. "It's over," she whispered. But I knew it wasn't really over. Justice had been served through the legal system, yes. But the trauma, that would take much longer to heal. What mattered was that Charlotte had been heard, that Violet and the others had been believed, that the darkness had finally been exposed. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for February 15th. 2 months after the conviction, Victor Marks would stand before a federal judge and learn exactly how many years he would spend behind bars. Federal racketeering charges carried sentences ranging from 20 years to life, depending on the severity of the crimes and the defendant's criminal history. But something happened 3 weeks before that sentencing hearing. Something I never expected. Victor's attorney requested a meeting. With me. Specifically, Detective Mills called me with the news. "His lawyer wants you to visit Victor in the detention center," she said. "No Charlotte. No other victims. Just you." "Why?" He wouldn't say. But Marcus, you don't have to do this. You have no obligation to. I'll do it. There was silence on the line. Why? Mills asked. Because I need to look him in the eye. I need to see if there's any humanity left in there. And I need to know that Charlotte is truly safe from him. The federal detention center was exactly what you'd expect. Gray concrete, metal detectors, guards everywhere. The smell of industrial cleaner mixed with something darker, more permanent. They brought Victor into a small interview room. Handcuffs, orange jumpsuit, but the same arrogant posture I'd seen in surveillance photos. He looked at me for a long moment before speaking. You're Charlotte's son, he said. Not a question. I am. Army Ranger. 6 years of service. 3 deployments. Decorated soldier. I did my homework on you, Marcus. I knew exactly who you were when you came back to town. Then you knew what would happen if you didn't back down. Victor laughed. It was a hollow sound. That's the thing. I didn't believe you'd actually do anything. I thought you'd be like everyone else. Make noise for a while, then get tired and go away. That's what always happened before. This time was different. Yeah, this time was different. He leaned back in his chair. For the first time, I saw something in his expression that wasn't arrogance. It was exhaustion, maybe even regret. Do you know how many women came forward because of your mother? Victor asked. 17. 17 women who I thought would never speak. Who I thought I'd intimidated enough that they'd stay silent forever. But once Charlotte spoke, they all started talking. Like dominoes falling. That's what happens when one person refuses to be afraid. I said, is that what you think this is about? Fear? You think I targeted those women just to control them? I think you targeted vulnerable women because you're a coward. Because you knew they couldn't fight back. And because the system was protecting you. Victor's expression hardened. The system wasn't protecting me. I was the system. You understand that? For 12 years, I ran this town. Police, judges, prosecutors. They all answered to me in one way or another. Not because I was powerful, because I understood how power actually works. You give people what they need. Money, information, protection from their own problems. And in return, they look the other way when you need them to. Until the FBI got involved. Until you got involved. That's the difference. If Charlotte had just accepted what happened and moved on like everyone else, none of this would have escalated. The FBI would still be building their case slowly. My network would still be intact. But you came home. You made noise. You refused to accept the reality of how things worked. And you broke everything. I stared at him. You're blaming me? For exposing your criminal enterprise? For making sure you face consequences for assaulting my mother and 17 other women? I'm not blaming you. I'm acknowledging what you did. You won, Marcus. You got justice. Your mother is safe. Those other women got their day in court. The system worked exactly like it's supposed to. Congratulations. There was no sincerity in his voice. Just bitterness. Why did you want to see me? I asked. Victor looked at me directly for the first time. Because in 3 weeks, I'm going to be sentenced to 30+ years in federal prison. And I wanted to look in the eyes of the man who destroyed my life. I wanted to see if there was any guilt there. Any doubt. Any sense that maybe you went too far. There isn't. I know. I can see it. You believe you did the right thing. You believe your mother deserved justice and that I deserve punishment. You believe the system worked. It did work. Did it? Or did you just replace one form of control with another? I controlled through fear and intimidation. You controlled through moral righteousness and legal procedures. But at the end of the day, you still forced an outcome through power. You just used a different kind of power than I did. I stood up. The difference is that my power was legitimate. It was based on truth and justice. Yours was based on violence and exploitation. And you think that makes you better than me? Yes, I do. Victor smiled. It was a sad, empty smile. Then you haven't learned anything. Power is power, Marcus. Whether it comes from a gun or a courtroom or an Army Ranger's training. It's all the same. And eventually, you'll realize that. I walked toward the door, then stopped. No, I won't. Because unlike you, I understand the difference between justice and revenge. between protecting people and controlling them. And that's why Charlotte is safe now. That's why those 17 other women can finally sleep at night. Not because I destroyed you, because the system finally worked the way it was supposed to. I left him there, sitting in that gray room, wearing handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No anger. Just a quiet certainty that the right thing had been done. 3 weeks later, Victor Marks was sentenced to 32 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Colin received 7 years. Officer Patterson received 15 years for corruption and obstruction of justice. The judge who had dismissed cases received 10 years. The entire criminal network collapsed. And Charlotte, Violet, Harper, Jocelyn, Paige, and the other victims finally had the one thing they'd been denied for so long. Justice. 3 months after Victor's sentencing, everything changed again. It started with a phone call from Detective Mills. She sounded different, stressed, urgent, like she was calling from somewhere she shouldn't be. Marcus, I need to see you. Alone. Not at the station. Somewhere private. We met at a diner 30 miles away from town. The same place where I'd met Violet weeks earlier. Mills arrived with a folder, her jaw tight. What I'm about to tell you cannot leave this table, she said. I'm violating department protocol by even showing you this. But you deserve to know. She opened the folder. Inside were photographs, financial records, email transcripts between high-ranking law enforcement officials and Victor Marks. We found this while processing evidence from Victor's office, Mills explained. It was hidden, deliberately concealed. The FBI missed it in their initial sweep. I stared at the documents, trying to understand what I was seeing. Victor wasn't just paying officers for protection, Mills continued. He was paying federal agents, active FBI agents. The investigation that took him down? 3 of the investigators assigned to that task force were on Victor's payroll. The room started spinning. How is that possible? They helped convict him. They did their job because they had no choice. Too many people knew. Too much evidence. But Marcus, there's something else. Something worse. She showed me another document. A bank transfer dated 3 months before Charlotte's assault. Victor was being set up, Mills said quietly, by his own people. The federal agents on his payroll decided he'd become a liability. His operation was getting too exposed. Too many complaints. Too much heat. So they arranged for the assault on your mother to happen. I felt my entire body go cold. They set it up? Not directly, but they ensured that enough evidence would surface. They made sure Charlotte would go to the police. They knew it would trigger an investigation. They used Victor's violence against him to take him down and consolidate their own power within the organization. That's insane. Why would federal agents do that? Because Victor was making $30 million a year. When he goes away, someone else takes over that operation. And the agents had agreements with the replacement. A new leadership that would be easier to control. More compliant. I couldn't breathe. So they used my mother. They used Charlotte as bait. Not exactly. The assault happened because Victor is who he is. The agents didn't force him to do it. But they created the conditions for it. They knew he was desperate. They knew he was violent. And they let it happen because they knew it would serve their purposes. What happens now? I asked. That's the complicated part, Mills said. If this goes public, it undermines everything. The convictions could be overturned. Victor could walk free on appeal. The entire case becomes a disaster. So the FBI is covering it up. They're handling it internally. 3 agents are under investigation. But it's being done quietly. No public announcement. No media coverage. The story stays as it is. Biker gang leader gets convicted. Justice served. But it's not justice if it was corrupted from the start. No, it's not. But Marcus, here's what you need to understand. Victor is still in prison. Victor still assaulted your mother. Victor still ran a predatory operation that hurt 17 women. Even if the method by which he was caught was compromised, the outcome is still correct. He deserves to be in prison. I understood what Mills was saying. But I also understood what she wasn't saying. The system wasn't just broken. It was actively corrupt, even at the highest levels. Even when it produced the right outcome, the process was rotten. That night, I sat with Charlotte on the porch again. "There's something you need to know," I said. And I told her everything. About the corrupt federal agents. About how her assault had been part of a larger scheme. About how she had been used as a tool in a power struggle between criminals and corrupt law enforcement. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Does it change anything?" she asked finally. "What do you mean? Does it change what happened to me? Does it change what happened to those other women?" "No. But it means, then I don't want to know about it," Charlotte said. "I know that makes me a coward or naive or whatever else you want to call it. But Marcus, I've spent months trying to heal from what happened. I've spent months getting stronger. And if I start thinking about the corruption and the schemes and the lies, I'll break all over again. The public has a right to know. Maybe they do, but not from me. I'm done being part of this. I'm done carrying this burden. Let the authorities handle it however they're going to handle it. I just want my life back." I wanted to push her, to tell her that staying silent meant the corruption would continue, that other people might be hurt because we didn't speak up. But looking at my mother, really looking at her, I realized she'd already sacrificed enough. A week later, I met with Detective Mills again. "I want to know what's going to happen," I said, "to those federal agents. They'll be quietly reassigned. Their careers are effectively over, but there won't be public charges or trials. That's the deal that's been made. So they get away with it. In terms of legal consequences, yes, but they'll spend the rest of their careers knowing that their corruption was exposed. They'll never advance. They'll never be trusted. In some ways, that's a harsher punishment than prison." I wasn't sure I believed that, but I also wasn't sure I had the energy to fight it anymore. 6 months later, life looked different. Not perfect, but different. Charlotte went back to work at Rosie's Diner. The bruises had faded completely. The fear? That was fading too, but slower. Some nights, she still locked the doors twice. Some mornings, she still flinched at loud noises. But she was living again. Really living. Violet started a support group for assault survivors in our town. 12 women came to the first meeting, 16 to the second. By the fourth meeting, there were 23. Women who'd been silent for years. Women who'd accepted what happened to them because they thought they had no choice. Now they were finding their voices. Harper took a job as an advocate with a nonprofit that helped victims navigate the legal system. Jocelyn went back to school. Paige opened her own business. These weren't stories of miraculous recovery. They were stories of slow, painful healing. Of people choosing to keep moving forward even when moving forward was hard. The Iron Riders organization dissolved. Not overnight. Criminal networks don't just disappear. But without Victor's leadership and with federal oversight now active, the operation crumbled. Some members went to prison. Others scattered to other cities. The power that once seemed absolute simply evaporated. Victor sits in a federal penitentiary in Allentown. He appeals every year. Every year, his appeal is denied. He has 32 years left to serve. I stayed in Pennsylvania longer than I planned. I got a job working with a veterans organization, helping soldiers transition back to civilian life. I found that my military training could be used for something other than warfare. It could be used for healing. And then something unexpected happened. On a Tuesday afternoon in June, I got a visitor at the organization's office. It was Amber. "I heard you were back in town permanently," she said, standing in the doorway. "I wanted to see you." We sat in the break room, drinking coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since morning. "I left Victor," Amber said, "a month after the trial. I couldn't be around that world anymore. Couldn't keep pretending it was normal." "Where are you now?" "Working at a hospital. Same hospital your mother used to work at, actually, in the maternity ward. I found out I like helping people more than I like being afraid." "That's good, Amber. I wanted to thank you," she said, "for what you did, for protecting your mother, for making sure those women were heard. I know I had a small part in it, just delivering a warning, but it mattered, and I wanted to thank you." After she left, I sat alone in that break room and realized something. This wasn't about revenge or justice in the way people usually talk about it. It wasn't about destruction or punishment or making someone suffer. It was about creating space for people to heal. It was about refusing to accept a broken system and pushing until it worked. It was about one person, Charlotte, refusing to be silent, which gave permission to 17 other women to speak, which changed the trajectory of an entire community. That evening, I met with Charlotte at our house. We made dinner together like we used to before everything happened. "I want to ask you something," Charlotte said as we sat at the kitchen table. "And I want you to answer honestly. Okay, do you regret coming home? Do you regret getting involved with all of this?" I thought about it carefully. No, I don't regret it. But I also understand now that coming home wasn't just about protecting you. It was about something larger. It was about refusing to accept injustice. And that's exhausting. That's ongoing. That's not something that gets resolved with a trial and a conviction. What do you mean? I mean that there are still predators out there. There are still corrupt officials. There are still systems that fail people. What happened to you and those other women was specific, but it was also part of a larger pattern. And now that I've seen it, I can't unsee it. Charlotte reached across the table and took my hand. Then don't unsee it. Stay awake to it. But also remember to live, to love, to find joy. Because justice without humanity is just another form of violence. As I'm telling you this story tonight, I want to speak directly to you, the person listening. You know who you are. You're here because you believe in justice. You believe in courage. You believe that one person can make a difference. And you're right. Charlotte's decision to report what happened, even when the system seemed indifferent, created a ripple effect that changed lives. Not just hers, not just mine, but 17 other women, and countless future women who will be safer because predators like Victor Marx are now in prison. I want to know what brought you here tonight. I want to understand what stories speak to you. What themes resonate? Are you drawn to betrayal stories where people face impossible odds? Are you interested in revenge narratives where quiet justice is served? Do you prefer stories with military elements, family conflicts, emotional depth? I'm asking you directly now, in the comments below. Tell me, what kind of stories do you want to hear? What themes matter to you? What characters do you connect with? What endings satisfy you? Because I'm committed to bringing you stories that resonate with who you are and what matters to you. Your feedback shapes everything I create. So please, don't be shy. Comment below and tell me what you're looking for. Next time, I'm bringing you an even more intense thriller, an even more shocking betrayal, an even more epic revenge story that will keep you thinking long after it ends. Stories about family secrets that destroy lives. Stories about people who thought they were safe but discover they never were. Stories about justice served in ways you won't expect. Until then, please hit like, subscribe to this channel, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories matter. They show us we're not alone. They show us that other people have suffered what we've suffered. And they show us that healing is possible. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening.